All right, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We might have a few stragglers pop in, but for now, let's go ahead and get going. So my name is Victoria Malvey. You might have heard my name as we've communicated with you for the Aspiring Educator Scholarship. I am going to ask that all of you remain on mute for the duration of the presentation for the webinar. We will have a space for questions and answers at the end of the presentation where we can have a big discussion for anything that pops up. Right, so this is our quick agenda here. So we'll start with welcome and introductions of me as well as my team, and then an overview of the Aspiring Educator Scholarship. And then we'll also show you who else is participating in the educator, what other educator preparation programs are participating in the scholarship. We'll review the process of awarding the scholarship, a guide to receiving those funds, and then as we just said, a question and answer at the end of the presentation. So quick introductions here. My name is Victoria Malvey. As I just said, I work within the talent office as the education services specialist. I have two of my team members here, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Belcher-Felton. I am the support staff within the talent office.
Thank you, Michelle. It looks like our grant specialist, Owen, is not on the call right now, but you might be familiar with him. He's the one that is always in communication with you for the funding and anything with EGMS. So moving right into it, the overview of the Aspiring Educator Scholarship. Here's just a picture of the generic Aspiring Educators Program flyer. It was initiated in spring of 2024, and the eligibility requirements as they stand right now are that a student would have had to graduated from an Alliance school district in Connecticut, then be enrolled in a CSDE-approved educator preparation program. And of course, they also have to be in good academic standing within the EPP. You might be familiar with the fact that we originally had this set out for students that are diverse students in an Alliance district, but we've actually since revoked that, and it's just for students from an Alliance district in order to kind of capture a wider girth of students that can apply and take advantage of this scholarship. And as you may be aware as well, there are currently ongoing changes. There are several bills out for the scholarship that might come to fruition. And so once those changes are finalized, they will be implemented immediately, and we will let you know if there's any changes that you should be made aware of. But as of right now, this is the eligibility requirements of the scholarship. And to apply, students need to fill out the online application. We send this out each semester. It's relatively quick, and it does ask the student to confirm their information, including their school and their program, the Alliance district that they graduated from, and their expected graduation date of their current program. We do ask new applicants to submit 2 letters of recommendation, a resume, and proof of acceptance into an EPP. Moving right along. So there's been some questions about what the application or what the scholarship can apply to. So hopefully this can clear this up. Students are eligible for a total of $10,000 per academic year. It can apply to no more than $5,000 per each academic semester. And the funds can only be applied to tuition. So it can't be applied to room and board or cost of attendance, like books or anything like that. If a student does have funding or grants from an external source that isn't this scholarship, that does apply to room and board or books or anything like that, you can obviously have this scholarship applied just to the tuition and still utilize that other scholarship. And you might have to let us know if there needs to be a correction for if there's, you submitted for $5,000, but really it needs to change to $3,000 in order for the student to get the maximum funding for them. So I know it's kind of confusing that sometimes people were asking if it could apply to other things besides the tuition, especially if there was a surplus, but unfortunately we do not award a surplus at all. So it's only up to that $5,000 in a given academic semester.
Old, I think usually they do the tubes much earlier, but I don't know.
I'm sorry,
So
what
my
was that?
daughter finally pushed to take her to an EN.
Oh, sorry. No worries, sorry. I didn't hear that. I didn't know if that was a question. Alrighty, no worries. Just moving right along here. And this is just an overview of our participating EPPs in the program. You obviously might be aware of your own name here, but in case you wanted to know who else is participating, we do have a pretty good variety of universities across the state. And you'll also notice that these universities, some are standard, fall and spring semester, and then we have others that are alternative route, that they are able to participate because we kind of work with them based off of their different sort of schedules that we have. So in case you wanted to see who else is out there participating in this program. Moving forward to the process of awarding funds. So we tried our best to break this down into these basic steps. There's obviously a lot of nuance that goes into each and every one of these different steps from the process of beginning to end. But when a student first applies, they'll be applying to the application, and then moving from there, there's about 7 steps to be involved with for until they receive their funding from EGMS through that check for you. So when CSDE sends your EPP the list of students to verify for academic standing, it's also really important that in your response, not only are you verifying that they're in good academic standing within your university, but also to let us know the tuition balance if it is less than $5,000. That way we can actually move this along a little bit quicker so that we know what to expect for our budget upload. And also noting that of these steps, the most time consuming step will be the funding process. It could be very weeks to a few months, depending on the back and forth, as well as how many hands need to touch that, whether it's us or your own EPP that has multiple people that are approving these different steps. And here's just a timeline expectation of from when a student first has the application open and applies to when they should expect to receive funding. So this isn't exact. It can vary greatly depending on the amount of students that actually apply in a given semester, just because the amount of students will impact how quickly or how long it takes to vet through the documentation needed and the review of these students. So we do try our best, obviously, to move forward from one stage to the next in a timely fashion. And we have recently changed our application to reflect there are 2 different types of student applicants. So there's new students who have never received the scholarship, and then there's repeat students. If the student does select that they have never received the scholarship, their application will be a little bit longer and they're asked to complete more detailed information. And they're also asked to submit letters of recommendation, the resume, and proof of acceptance into the EPP. But if they have already received the scholarship, we don't need those documentation pieces in place because we already have them, and it's a little bit quicker for them to submit. But either way, the student shouldn't be spending more than 10-15 minutes on the application total, so it should be pretty quick for them. And I also want to note that this timeline from the deadline to apply of when a student can receive funding can take months. EPPs should be aware that you're required to return information to us to help streamline this process and move it along. The funding portion, due to approvals from both our end at CSDE and your end at the EPPs, can take 4 to 8 weeks just because of so many steps involved, and we will review those steps coming up. And moving forward to receiving funds. So as you're aware, EGMS is where the grant funding is housed and made available to you. To access funding for the scholarship, we treat it as a grant, as you should be aware. There are 2 main cycles to be aware of for this. So first is the budget upload and approval, and then second is the funding request and approval. And the difference between these 2 cycles is that the budget upload is when CSDE determines what your budget is to give to you based on the total applicants after we vet through their academic standing. And then the funding request is then how you will be drawing down the approved budgeted amount. So one cannot occur without the other, and these steps are reliant on one another. And I also want to make note that throughout this entire process, EGMS should be checked regularly during the cycle, just to ensure that your EPP is up to date on the next step for approval. Sometimes it does come through over email, but those emails are kind of automatically generated and they could definitely get lost in an inbox. So regularly checking on EGMS will be the best way to make sure that you're making sure your step is all set and moving forward onto the next one. And here are 6 somewhat easy steps to follow, just so that you have it in the back of your head to know what to expect as we go through the process. So once CSDE gives your EPP the given budget for that semester, you'll then upload your budget within that amount given for the applicable fiscal year and grant, the grant being aspiring educators. And prior to submitting any step, please double check that all components of what you're submitting is up to date, including the fiscal year, as well as the applicable grant. And once your budget is uploaded, then CSDE will get notified and will approve based on the amount initially budgeted for you, meaning that if we budget you for, say, 3 students at $5,000 per approved student, your total budget is $15,000. So your budget upload should match that exact amount and not be over or under. And this is why it's important to double check your submission. You can always obviously correct this and submit again, but any sort of extra steps it takes is longer until the students actually receive the funding. And then once you are approved, you'll receive notification in EGMS to begin your funding request. So that's that email notification that you'll see, or again, you could just check EGMS in the portal just to see that you're up to date. And this is then how you request the approved budgeted funds. So when you submit your funding request, please be sure to submit the entire amount, not just one student at a time. And should there be an unforeseen reason to submit additional funding at a later date, it's completely fine to do so. However, submitting all in one request is easiest for CSDE and you. And once submitted, the request is then bumped over back to us for approval and going through those steps. And again, you can always monitor the status of the funding request. It will fall into different statuses until it hits approved. So if you ever want to see where you're at, feel free to check the status or just give us a call and we could walk through it with you. And then, of course, once you've been approved, your check electronic is sent out to your EPP. All right, and we've included some screenshots here that I'm sure look familiar because it's EGMS. So this is for the accessing your scholarship or your grant. You should be able to access it in the search tab that I've kind of highlighted there in green for you, and also making sure that that your fiscal year, the funding application and grants should all be accurately displayed when you are looking for the results you're looking for. And it also shows in here like where you can find that in the little green highlighted area right here. A helpful tip to keep in mind is that once you do access this grant, you'll consistently see this header that I put in the second screenshot at the top of the page. It'll show your EPP, the fiscal year, and the grant that you are working in. So that should remain at the top of the page no matter what you're doing within this grant, whether it's the budget upload or the funding application. So just make sure you're always looking in the right area. And the budget uploads can be found in the funding application tab under budget. Note that your budget upload, similar to the funding application, should be for the entire amount that CSDE has given you based on vetted students, as we've said before. And again, keeping in mind that that little banner at the top that I've highlighted in yellow is the way it should be, that you're working in the right funding application. And funding requests can be submitted utilizing the Create a New Fund request. It's here at the bottom of the page, highlighted in green. And remember to submit for all of your students per the semester, not per student. So again, as an example, if I had 3 students all approved for $5,000, I should be submitting one fund request for $15,000. And now for Q&A. So I will go ahead and close this so we could see each other. And are there any questions or thoughts on any of the content that we covered today? You can go ahead and go off mute
Okay.
with that question. Yeah.
Are there any specific deadlines? I know you said to check the website consistently, but for reporting and drawdown and budgeting, are there any set deadlines or amounts of dates after the award letters are given to the students that we should follow?
Owen here can correct me. He's on now. Owen can correct me if I am wrong, but I don't think there's any specific deadline. It's more or less up to the EPP and CSDE of where you're at in the steps of funding application. But Owen, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. You're on mute.
Thank you for the update. Hello, everyone. Owen Quinn, I'm sure you know me from EGMS and the nightmares that occur there and trying to walk you through it. So the simple answer is that we have already done in OF1 and 2, inside ballpark language for the budgets, and a budget upload has been approved and is in EGMS. And already I have contacted all the EPPs and let them know that it is in the system and ready for drawdown. And already 3 or 4 of the EPPs have made application for the funds to be drawn down. So that's important for the EPP to get the money on the local level. But most important for the State Department of Education and the Talent Office is that the money gets credited to the student's account ASAP, so they don't lose any privileges for the college or university. So there is no timeline. It's available right now. The quicker you do it, the quicker you receive your funds. The quicker you receive your funds, the quicker it goes to the student account. And that seems to be the process that's there. And then there's a closeout procedure at the end. So at the end of the semester, when you've collected your money, we will want a final accounting of the activities that have taken place in-house for you. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Owen.
Thank
And to
you.
confirm, there's no deadline after funds are made available for an EPP to draw down those funds.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Correct.
Wonderful. Right. I think I saw Amanda F's hand pop up first, and then we have Amanda L. But of course, just feel free to come off mute whenever you want and answer and ask a question.
Hi, thank you. My question is there a place where we can see a list of the students for our institution that are receiving this rather than us having to get individual copies of their award notice, I guess?
So I can jump in and say, yes, that's available. If you send an email to me asking for that information, I normally make that readily available. I copy and paste what is available for each EPP. If I have missed yours, I apologize. And if you send me an email, and that's owen.quinn@ct.gov, and we'll get that right out to you.
So is that something that, I guess what I'm asking, is there a way for us to know who's receiving this before, like, rather than having to wait for the award notices from you? Like, is there a
Well,
place we can just go in and see a roster of our students?
So
Let me jump in here real quick. Generally speaking, once we send out the request for verification that they're enrolled and in good standing, anyone that comes back as verified, both of those is going to receive the scholarship. So you'll have that kind of heads up. Until we generate the letters, it's not official, but at least that gives you the heads up, until we're done with the process.
Thank you.
Amanda Lisicki, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Amanda had one of my questions, but then my other question was, if we're like one of the schools that received it, is it every educational program is eligible, or is it only certain majors, like certain education majors?
I guess Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong. They have to be in a approved education preparation program. So I think for each school there might be several like program tracks and majors that fall under that. It's not necessarily kind of one size fits all. So we haven't really, I think, seen any that are not applying that are not in a approved program, if that makes sense.
Correct. And they can be either undergrad or graduate level programs as long as they are CSC approved EPPs.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions that popped up during the course of the webinar?
Hi, I'm sorry, this is Amanda F again. I have another question.
Right.
You mentioned that this can only be applied to tuition.
Yeah.
So my first question is that tuition and fees, like like fees that are associated with tuition, completely excluding housing and meal plan? Can it be applied to tuition and fees or just the tuition portion?
It should be just to the tuition portion. I'm assuming the fees that are with that are what we kind of umbrella under just cost of attendance. So yeah, only to the actual tuition of the program.
So, okay, but like if a student, the fees are required. If a student is attending as a full-time student, the tuition and fees are their required charges. So like their student activity fee, their university fee, their general fee. So none of that can be included. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
it's only the tuition, none of the additional fees. Even if they are required, unfortunately, it can't be covered.
Okay, so then if you're saying that they can receive $5,000 per semester, our students would not even be eligible for that because our tuition line alone is less than that. So they would not be eligible, you're saying?
Well, they are still eligible. So, for example, if the total tuition per semester is just throwing out a number here is like 2,500, we will award up to that 2,500 and cover them for their tuition. But if
Well,
it is that, they don't have the surplus to apply to anything else, if that makes sense.
so they wouldn't be getting $5,000 per semester. They would only be getting up to what the actual tuition line is.
Yeah.
Correct.
And okay, so the next part to my question is, based on the timing of this, by the time we are finding out who is receiving this, we've already awarded them financial aid. We've already dispersed their financial aid. They potentially have already gotten refunds from us. If there, do you require that we make adjustments to their aid? Because this would then just be coming back to them as a refund.
I believe that would be an Owen question.
Well, uh, I'm not sure exactly the answer to that. It seems to me that it should not be a refund, but that it should go for the tuition and a reduction in the amount of the tuition should be reflected there to offset the aspiring educator scholarship, if that makes sense.
Um, maybe I'm just not following. And Amanda Lisicki also works in my office, so we might be having like similar questions. But let's just, I'm just gonna throw numbers out there. So let's just say our tuition fee is $3,000.
Correct.
Okay? And let's say that they're getting a scholarship from us at Western for $3,000. Plus they received other aid. So now by the time we're being notified of this award to them, we've already dispersed all of their scholarship and aid on our end. So now when we're giving them this fund now, there's no charges to be paid. Everything's paid already.
I see what you're saying. It's just the timeline is kind of not working basically by the time
Right.
you receive this, right?
So you get a
So
reimbursement for the $3,000.
I'm not following.
So the funds cannot go back to the student. So if there is no financial need, then they just don't get the scholarship.
Well, it's
That's
not that there's
really,
no financial need, it's that at the time we're getting notified that they're getting this award, their bill is paid in full. So there's nothing we can do but refund it back to them. Unless we take away the scholarship that we've already given them.
yeah, I'm not sure what to tell you. I mean, that's going to have to be a decision you make at your level. All I know is that this scholarship can only go to tuition. It cannot be given as a refund to the student.
So you said you're at Western Connecticut State University.
Correct.
Okay, so maybe this is a question for Paul Steinmetz to give me a call. He's got my telephone number, and we can discuss this in more detail on how to attack the situation for Western in your unique situation. But it's a reimbursement. It should be reimbursed for the $3,000, and how we do that mechanically, we can discuss with Paul and he can share it with you. How's that sound?
Paul, how does that sound to you?
Yes, it's good. Maybe Amanda and I will both call you and we'll set it up. I'll talk to you and we'll set up a meeting.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul.
Mhm.
I saw
The other
Amanda
Amanda,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
other Amanda, also from WestCon. So I do remember there was like 1 year, the lists of students that were emailed to us did have a question about like if they had financial need. I think it was for financial need rather than like if they still had a balance, but that I know specifically wasn't on this most recent batch. And I feel like I haven't seen it like earlier in this academic year either. In terms of like, so the only thing that was like asked was like, are they enrolled in the teacher placement and in good standing? So there wasn't really any place for us to even indicate that.
You're correct. I think there was initially a little bit of confusion as to what that financial need question meant. We can add on there if there's an amount that is less than 5,000. I think that's what we'll probably do going forward.
Yeah.
Heather, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think we kind of have the same. I'm at Southern, which is one of the sister schools to where Amanda, and both Amandas are, and we have the same concerns. How you're defining financial need and the students being able to receive this, because it sounds like most of our students really shouldn't be receiving it. Their bills are paid, and a lot of them have received refunds by the time they're even getting this. So I don't even know that you'd even be, kind of replacing it at that point.
Heather, I
Since,
agree with you. That's actually the point that I'm trying to make, is that the timing of this,
yeah,
based on in combination with the timing of how financial aid works and our timeline doesn't work, because like it's March and we're finding out about the students who are getting this. We dispersed their aid in January.
undergrad possibly assisting them because maybe they've had to, put something out of pocket, but like the grad students that I'm seeing have definitely overborrowed, and they're already receiving large refunds, so it's just like a large amount going back to them, so it just doesn't seem like they should be receiving these.
So I don't know if this is going to help at all. But in terms of hearing the term financial need, I know a lot of times that is applicable to, if it's like a needs-based or a merits-based in grant programs. But this should be, we call it the scholarship, that it is $5,000 up to $5,000 given to that student's tuition. If they have financial aid covering them for other things, that is financial aid, that doesn't mean they're not eligible. It just seems like the timeline needs to kind of add up so that, say I'm a student, I have $10,000 in tuition due, I could get 5,000 covered from this and then only pull 5,000 from financial aid, if that makes sense. It sounds like the biggest issue happens to be just this like inability to kind of get those funds to you in a timely fashion, and I completely hear that. And this is a relatively new scholarship program that we have initiated. It's only a few years old, so we're definitely open to feedback to see how we can better implement this and make sure that it's actually getting in your hands as soon as it needs to be for it to be effective for you and the students to take advantage of it in the given semester. So we are noting this, and this is really helpful feedback that maybe we could find a way to sort of tweak our program moving forward to meet those needs that you're saying right now. So we do appreciate all of your patience and understanding here, but everything is noted and definitely not unheard.
So I just want to jump in, like what I'm hearing, and I just want to make sure that I'm interpreting it correctly. Is it similar to regulation? Like I know there's other state programs where it says if there's other financial aid that is specifically for paying tuition and fees, that we would need to consider that. But for example, like a student who takes a direct loan, that direct loan can be used for any educational expense, that would not count against them for this program compared to if they got like a tuition specific scholarship. Because we also want to make sure that this program isn't preventing students from accessing other aid programs for other educational expenses that is not covered by aspiring educators, because they should still be able to receive aid for books, supplies, transportation, cost of living, all of that if they're entitled to aid through other programs. It might just be about the order in which we're kind of applying these mathematically, even if the timing and that order are not the same, to determine if a student is eligible. Is that kind of an accurate interpretation?
So that is correct. And if there is outside scholarships that are available, they should be applied first, especially if it is more liberal in that it pays for not only tuition, but some of those scholarships pay for books, computer fees, and room and board. So those should be applied first before you come to the aspiring education scholarship. And we have
So
that situation with Yale.
aid that they have on their account kind of to pay for other expenses is already there and that exceeds the cost of tuition, even if it could be used for other expenses, they would not be eligible for this program.
Well, I would use those funds first.
I guess I'm just trying to understand what you mean by use those funds first, like use them towards tuition.
So the example that I had with Southern, just to use an example, was Yale University has a scholarship that mirrored the aspiring educator scholarship. And that scholarship pays all tuition, pays all fees, pays books and room and board. So that superseded the aspiring educator scholarship because it encompassed more fees than would be allowable under the aspiring educator scholarship. So those would be applied first is what I was implying.
Also would like to just jump in as well on that. I think it's important to note if there are scholarship funds that do apply to room and board and basically say everything else besides tuition, that if there's a way to sort of strategically apply that scholarship to not tuition, knowing that maybe, $5,000 of this scholarship could be applied to it, otherwise it might not meet it. There's kind of a nuance and it's different for every single school and every student's, unique circumstances financially. And it might be a bit of a pain of going into that detailed work, but if you do have other scholarships that apply for room and board and tuition, and say you have this scholarship that applies to tuition, I would highly recommend looking in a way to say, how can we creatively apply this scholarship, knowing it only applies to tuition, and also the room and board applying to room and board, and then the surplus going to tuition.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
There's a certain amount of juggling that has to go on. That would be right, Victoria. If you could play both sides against the middle would be ideal for that, to get the maximum scholarship to the student.
Does that help?
Can I ask another question, just some clarification? So if we have a scholarship that is specifically designed, it is intended to pay a student's full tuition and fees, it is equal to our tuition and fees. If a student is receiving that scholarship, am I correct that they are not eligible to receive the aspiring educator scholarship?
Okay, so if that scholarship does cover all of their tuition, then there would be nothing that this scholarship applies to. So yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or feedback? All right, if there are no other questions that pop up right now, I will feel free to give you back 10 minutes to your day. However, if you do have any questions that pop up in your head that have come up after this webinar, please feel free to let us know, and we're happy to jump on a call with you and set up some time with you. And there is a lot of nuance to this scholarship of how it can be applicable to your specific program and the specific students within that program. It's not really a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. We wish it could be for everyone's sake, but we do appreciate all this feedback and any questions asked. So without further ado, we will go ahead and end for today. But again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions.